Hi there, Rabbi. I had an interesting thought, more of an observation than anything really intelligent to say. But when the first missionaries came to the West and they found the Aztecs cutting out people's hearts with stone knives, and most people don't realize there's a very specific spiritual way that you cut somebody's heart out with a stone knife. I know how to do it, and I'd be glad to show you if you ask. Um, And of course, the missionaries that came with the conquistadors were horrified and said, no, no, this is not what God is. God is this, and this is how you should worship God, and these are the rules that you should follow. And of course, that seemed to make perfect sense to the missionaries. And I'm sure there were some natives who said, no, I kind of like the old stone knife idea. And then somebody else said, no, well, these guys seem like they know what they're talking about, and they have guns and superior technology. So let's do God the way they say we should do it. And throughout the years, whenever someone has come up with a new way to worship God, there's always somebody who says, no, I like my old religion. And somebody else says, no, I like my new religion. And of course, it occurred to me that someday a spaceship comes down, lands on the planet. Some guys get out and they walk into a church and they say, or a temple or a mosque, and they say, what are you guys doing? We're worshiping God in each in our own way. Said, no, 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 you're not doing it right. We know all about God. We've been doing it for 10 million years now. You have to catch a fish, stick it on your head, and you have to do this little dance. That's what God really wants from all of us. And a lot of people will go, wait, that doesn't make sense. And the other guys say, well, they do have spaceships and faster than light, and they've been doing this for millions of years. They must have a point. So should we all start going out and catching fish and learning how to do the dance?
That's a fascinating subject. The idea that I know what God wants, but you don't, or mine is a true religion. And what I would like to have us do is what it says in the Talmud, a debate for the sake of heaven, to reach a common ground or conclusion, not to put the other person down, not to show they're wrong, not to have a victory. I'm a strong believer in teaching about religions. I'm a strong believer in each of us should talk about our belief system. Unfortunately, it almost always comes down to I'm right, you're wrong. And let's look at history and say, at this point in time, it's important that we just compare all our religions. Not because I'm right and you're wrong, not because I want to convert you, nothing to do with any of that. But perhaps I can pick up something from your approach. You might pick up something from my approach. Let's start from the position that God's unknowable. We don't know what God wants. And we have a lot of sacred books. So why don't we read each other's sacred books? Why don't we see what we can learn from each other? We don't have to convert. We don't have to change. You don't have to agree in a sense that you're right and I'm going to follow your religion, but rather what works for me? What gets me through the day? What helps me deal with death? What helps me deal with cancer? What helps me deal with coronary heart disease? What helps me deal with war and man's inhumanity to man? So let's look at all different religions, Joe. I think the guys from the spaceship would do us a big service if they came out and said, you all have a point. You know, why don't we discuss our religions? I don't want anyone to convert. I don't want anyone to change. Let's just teach each other what we're doing and then let each of us make a decision rather than making the claim that I know what God wants. I'm right. You're wrong. And I think that would go a long way to helping and solving and presenting what's going on. God's unknowable.